In the previous lecture, we understood how do we read the data from databases. As a part of this lecture, we'll understand query pushdown. Let's get started. As you know, database have tables. Table may have multiple columns. Now, Spark wants to read all the columns and all the rows, then no problem. But if Spark wants to read only the few columns and only the few rows to create the data frame. In the second case, where Spark wants to read only the few rows and few columns, what is the most efficient way? Is it reading all the columns and rows into the data frame and filtering on the Spark side, or only read the relevant rows and columns and then create the data frame? Like mostly the filter is happening here only. It's a no-brainer, right? It is always better to filter at the database level itself and read the data which is required to create the data frame and create a data frame. It will save enough resources and achieves the creation of the data frame faster. Now, what Spark does is, it makes the best effort to filter the data in the database itself before creating the data frame. Spark understands when you want only specific rows and specific columns, instead of reading all the columns and all the rows into the data frame, further filtering that, Spark will attempt to filter the data at the database level, then create a data frame. Let us understand this with an example. Assuming that you create a data frame called MySQL cats. This is the data frame. By reading the data from a MySQL, where we have created the database called pets, then we are trying to provide all these options like driver, URL, username of the database and password of the database. We have created this database by reading one of the table from this particular database. This is how it looks like. We have created a data frame, and data frame has some 4 columns, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and some 3 rows. I have taken this example to make a point. Please try to follow this very carefully. We have created a data frame called MySQL cats by reading the data from a database which has some 4 columns and 3 rows. When you want to create a data frame, as you know, until we call an action, nothing happens. Now, what we want to do is, we want to filter with the owner named Lennon. Here you can see the Lennon. We want to query only the records which has owner as Lennon. As we understand, Spark will not read all the records or create a data frame while defining the data frame itself. It will do that when action is called. If we are trying to filter, this is a transformation. In this case, you can see Spark is trying to push the filter into the database itself. So, Spark is making an attempt. No, I don't want to read all the records from the database, because the user wants to create the data frame only where the filter condition is satisfied. So Spark has made an attempt and it has succeeded to push down the filter into the database and retrieve the records which are satisfying the filter condition and creating the data frame. This is Spark's best attempt to push down the filter into the database. Now, in this case, if you see, we are trying to get the distinct here. The same thing, owner distinct. But if you notice, there is nothing as a part of the push down filters. Spark is not able to push down the filter in this case into the database and read only the records which are passing this condition. In one case, it is able to do that. In another case, it is not able to. So, it will try as much as possible to push down the filters to the database. It will try. In this case, it is better if you push down the filter into the database. Then what is the solution? What we should be doing? Better thing is, whenever you want to create a data frame or do some transformation, by only selecting few records, the best option is, instead of allowing the Spark to take a call to push down the filter, you only go ahead and create a query. You create a query and pass that entire query into your SQL that will return the results to create a data frame or as a data frame. Earlier, you let the Spark do the optimization and take a call to push down the filter. In this case, you are taking the control and defining the query and pushing that down into the database. So, the way we can do that, instead of specifying a table name, we can go ahead and specify a SQL query. But when you are trying to specify a SQL query, we need to do it in a bit special way. We have to wrap that query in a triple quotes. For example, here I am trying to get the distinct owners. This is a SQL query and I am trying to assign that to a one variable called a push query. Instead of providing the table name, I am providing the name of the query. Pay attention here. Everything is same. Instead of the table name, I am providing the query. If you look at the way it is explaining now, instead of having a table name here in the JDBC relation, it has a query. That is how you are taking a control of pushing down the filter into the database, so you avoid unnecessarily reading the data which is not required to create a data frame. Wonderful. This is how the Spark does the query push down. If you leave it to the Spark, it will make a best attempt to push down the query, or you do also have an option to provide the query in the place of table and push down the query into the database. Thank you.